may I introduce Mr. Fred Lee.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for the invitation and hospitality. I love the Netherlands. We've been here 13 times, and I stay 2 weeks every time and speak about 6 speeches. So this is not the only time I've been here, and I have learned early on that there is not a translatable word into Dutch that exactly means what we mean when we say the patient experience. We don't have that word experience in the same meaning in Dutch, and so I see various translations for that. By the way, I want to make sure everybody knows that my slides up here are in your packet. So if you want to follow along in this, I thought some of you may not know that you have it, but you do have that in front of you. And I like the moonshot analogy. I thought that's what we want to do today, is call good in the box and great out of the box. Good to great is a moonshot. But if you think I'm going to talk about make courtesy more important than efficiency, that's only a satellite shot. That's too small. That's too easy. Way too easy. Service is too easy. Those shots are not moonshots. What we want to go from today is to get out of the box of patient satisfaction. How do you get out of that box? I hope when I'm finished here, you will seriously consider never using the word patient satisfaction again. Finished, dead, gone, close the box. We're out of that box. Inside the box is courtesy. That's why I don't care about courtesy and efficiency. That's in the box. That's why I don't care about service. That is in the box. A moonshot gets us out of the box. And if you're really focused on the triple aim of the IHI, the great guru of which is, of course, Dr. Don Berwick, then today we're on target for that. We're right on your topic. The most difficult one in that triangle is making the patient experience equal at least to the other two. And of course, Don Berwick says it starts there. It's the most important one. It is the platform from which everything else emerges. That's where you start. So first of all, good to great. In patient perceptions is what I put up there. Why couldn't I say in patient satisfaction? Can we go from good to great in patient satisfaction? I say, no, you cannot. The definition of good is patient satisfaction, so that would be like saying going from good to good in patient satisfaction. Everyone in this room knows what it takes to satisfy any customer anywhere. Be nice, smile, put a smile on your face, say hello, introduce yourself, use the patient's name. That's easy. You can teach everybody to say that. Give them all scripts. And we will have a satisfied patient. And if you are focused on patient satisfaction, you will get our box of patient satisfaction. But that's not where I want to be today. I want to call that box good, but not great. The difference between perception and satisfaction is this. Satisfaction is one data point on a scale of perceptions. If you're dedicated to the data point in the middle, they don't love you and they don't hate you, which is the perception scale, then you are dedicated to something in the middle, trying to balance everything, and it's just okay. That's why I can't use the word patient satisfaction. That is the box I want out of. That takes a moonshot. I won't cover all the slides in here. I left a few for you to read on your own because I'd rather give you more slides than I can cover than the other way. Because, it would take me about 10 hours to do all the content in the book. We don't have that time. And actually for today, let's say that the title of my book is not If Disney Ran Your Hospital, Let's say instead our title should be, if you read my book, you will know it should be, if Walt Disney ran your hospital with, if Disney ran your hospital with Walt Disney as the CEO, Hans Selye, anybody know who this is? Oh dear. Well, we won't go from good to great if we don't know more about Hans Selye. Hans Selye is our clinical quality officer, physician, specializes, his special, of course, he was a research scientist. He's called the father of psychoneuroimmunology. Do you know what that means? Psycho means what? What you think. Neuro means how your thoughts are transferred by neurology so your body will do what your brain tells it to do. That's neuro. And what is immunology? Is the immune system that fights disease. So the science of psychoneuroimmunology started with the understanding that stress hurts the immune system. And if you're under high stress for a long period of time, it will kill you because your immune system cannot fight off normal diseases because your stressful thoughts depress the immune system. So let me ask you a question. How stressful is the experience of a patient in the typical hospital? So stress is clear up to here, and we think courtesy is all we need. Nothing for stress, just courtesy, like you were shopping for a Coca-Cola or you were at Burger King. Just service. Well, service will satisfy them, but doing nothing for their stress level means we are blind to an important aspect of healing. So psychoneuroimmunology enters into what my book is all about. Of course, I like W. Edwards Deming. How many of you know who Deming is? How many of you have heard of Six Sigma? More hands. That's just Deming. Okay, Six Sigma is the father, came from W. Edwards Deming, who is the father of Do you remember the days when we used the term TQM, Total Quality Management? Remember that? ISO 9000s, remember that? Everybody goes to Japan to find out what Deming did at Toyota, and we have the Toyota, program. PDCA, does anybody know what I mean when I say PDCA or PDSA? Deming. Deming, yes, the improvement cycle. That's who Deming is. So in my hospital, there's my officer for quality, vice president. This is the medical staff. This is a physician, the greatest name. Many people call this person the Einstein of medicine, because until he came along, we believed the immune system worked completely independently, and we had no way to influence the effectiveness of your immune system. That's what medicine believed before he came along. Finally, let's make Mother Teresa our nursing vice president. By the way, I am married to a chief nursing officer who has retired and travels with me now, but I'm very immersed in the patient experience through the nurse manager's eyes. Everything I say has been endorsed by her, and she's enthusiastic about it. So if you say we don't need anything from Disney, how about a chief nursing officer who has her master's degree in public health, where she learned all about Hans Selye and the influence of our thoughts on our stress? Well, I want to come back to Disney. The innovative thought at Disney is simply this. I learned from a book called The Experience Economy that these three sectors of the economy are not adequate. When you come out of a movie, you do not say, great service. When you come out of Disneyland, you do not say, great service, because these are not services. You go to the opera, you do not come out and say, how was the service at your side of the room? Our service, it doesn't make any sense to use the word service. What you are buying in the world of opera and television and movies and Disneyland, what you are buying is an emotional experience. That's what it is. Has nothing to do with service. So these authors say that since we have now made enough money, the average person has the kind of income to buy television and go to shows and go to the circus and all these things, there's a huge part of the economy that is not a service. It's an experience that is staged for you, and you go to laugh or cry. Because not all theater is only about comedy. Now, Disney's mission statement does not fit us because Disney has chosen only the comedy end of the experience spectrum. Disney's mission statement up here is we deliver fun and happiness. Actually, it goes on. We deliver, fun and happiness for the whole family. That doesn't make any sense to a nurse. And that's why it's easy for a nurse to say, how do you connect us to Disney? That just seems silly. No, we are not on the Disney end of the emotion spectrum. You know, if Tom Hanks plays something for Disney, he's the voice in Toy Story of Woody. Tom Hanks, the movie star. But if somebody wants to make a movie using Tom Hanks portraying a person dying of AIDS, did anyone see that movie? Well, you would not call that entertaining. It's not entertainment, it's tragic. And so if you had the script and you went to Walt Disney or went to Disney and say, could you please make this movie? What's it about? A man dying of AIDS. They would say, did you see our mission statement? We don't produce movies about AIDS. It's not in that's not what we're basically about. We're only about the fun side of theater. But there's also a tragic side, and that's why in theater we have two masks. And so this is the connection to Disney, and it is the only real connection I want to make. It has nothing about clowns. It's not about balloons. It's not about entertaining the little kids on the sick ward. It's about the fact that at Disney, who are in the emotional experience business, are dedicated to helping a family have fun together. But a hospital is there to meet the emotional needs of a patient and their family who are going through pain, fear, anxiety, sadness, grief. What's our answer for that? What's our answer for the patient's emotional trauma in the emotional experience? We can't get that from Disney. We can only say we are in the same emotion sector, but we meet different emotional needs. So that's the destination of our moonshot. Our moonshot is to say service does not meet the needs of a person who is fearful, anxious, and in pain. You cannot go to the Marriott training program for their employees and learn about anything that'll help you deal with pain and suffering. You would go to Mother Teresa to talk about that, not Disney. A hospital without compassion would be like Disney without fun. Compassion is how we meet people's emotional needs when they are in pain. Fun is how Disney meets your emotional needs when you want to have fun as a family. Disney is in the guest and family experience, and so are we. Anything that happens to one member of the family happens to the whole family. And that's why we need to stop saying patient-centered care. We need to modify that to say patient and family-centered care. We must not forget the family in our emotional business any more than Disney forgets the family in their emotional business. Now that's the only parallel I want to make today. You can see why I want to get out of this box of service, because it has nothing to do with pain and suffering. That's where we have to go. We have a confusion with Disney because Disney is in more than just theater. Here's movies, theater, theme parks, television. That's the experience side. But Disney also does restaurants. They run hotels. They build stores. So they're in the service business. But they are also in manufacturing. Look at all the toys that they make and spread all over the world. You know, half all this product that is made overseas and comes around. They're in all of these businesses, and that's one of the big confusions that we have when we think Disney. So what I want to say is stop being confused. And if you go to Disney to learn something for healthcare, they have a healthcare version in the Disney Institute you can go to. I was the one who served as the consultant that designed the 3-day program that you would go to if you went to Disney today. You would say, oh, I want to sign up for your healthcare version of Disney's approach to quality service, and you would learn only about service. The reason I left the Disney Institute is because even here they would not go here. Why won't they go here? Who at Disney can teach you about pain and suffering? They are stuck. They're not a hospital. None of their employees deal with pain and suffering. So they have to only teach service. And that's why I left Disney, is because they could only teach service. And the book that I talked about, The Experience Economy, said that's not enough where you really have emotions in people's lives. So I want to stop being confused. The way from good to great is to go from service to the emotional experience and say, what can we do to relieve pain and suffering while the patient is with us? Take a look at this chart. I don't know if you can read it because, you know, this graphic goes through a mirror up here. Do you know that? You see that mirror? So, well, by the time it bounces through the mirror to here, this might be a little fuzzy. It wouldn't be as clear. Can you read these? Okay, these are the dimensions of quality care according to the Institute of Medicine. The IHI has adopted all of those as their metrics. Triple AIM is focused on these things. And they start with overall ranking. But quality care is effective care, safe care, coordinated care, and patient-centered care. Access, cost-related problems, timeliness of care. Then they have efficiency, equity. That means, does everybody in your society have access to good care? And of course, long, healthy, productive lives and health expenditures. So we have a graph here. It has 7 countries. Australia, Canada, Germany, Netherlands, New Zealand, UK, and US. Now let's just take the one overall one at the top. Who is number 1 overall? Netherlands. Who is the last overall? 7 is the worst. US. So the question is, why are we listening to a guy from the US? Well, that's a really good question. I get this from reporters. You know, reporters want to speak to me. I know what they're going to say. Why should we listen to anybody from the U.S.? You got the worst system in the world. It's the most costly and get the worst. Oh, let's just go on and on. Yeah. However, I did notice the U.S. beat the Netherlands in one of these categories. Can you find it? We're not the best, but you are the worst. Patient-centered care. I have a feeling that is the reason someone translated my book, because my book is about patient-centered care, the emotional needs of the patients as well as their physical needs and their courtesy needs. Courtesy and emotional needs are different. I expect you to say, be great. I expect you to treat me with dignity and respect. But compassion is something extra. It's not just dignity and respect. There's something more involved in that. So maybe in my book, and I know I have a strong message to give in America. I am not coming to this country because I think we do it right and you need to learn something. I say in America, we don't do it even half right. And my book is for America, not the world. The fact that somebody liked it here and invites me to speak indicates that, well, we all have some of the same difficulties in all of our health systems. That you really can't hold anybody up as perfect, because when you take all these different categories, we can be very strong even overall, but not make it as good as somebody else in some other category. So it's a book on patient-centered care, and I'm going to skip that slide. Go to here. Here's a little formula I like. It's hard for me to get the words right because I know they don't translate perfectly into Dutch. But certainly the patient perception of quality probably translates just fine. Equals the experience, that's the hard one, the story, we'll put it here, the story that the patient has to tell, over or divided by the patient's expectations of the story they would tell. Now, if it's 1-to-1, right, if my story is the same as I expected, actually I have no story. Nobody has a story if they got what they expected. You only have a story to tell if you got better than you expected or worse than you expected. Dissatisfied people have a story to tell, and very satisfied people have a story to tell. But a satisfied patient has no story to tell. How does your reputation grow with no stories? In fact, what destroys your reputation is also stories. That's the thinking. Now, if it's 1-to-1, even if I expected only a 2 on a 5-point scale and you gave me a 2, I'm satisfied. But if I expected a 5 and you gave me a 5, I'm still only satisfied. I still have no story to tell. It's only if I expected a 4 and you gave me a 5, or you gave me a 3 or a 2 or a 1, only then do I have a story to tell which will affect your reputation in the community, especially if it happens a lot. 1-to-1 ratio. Now, some people will point out that we have 2 numbers there, right? There's a number for the top and there's a number for the bottom. And maybe you should influence the bottom number. Maybe they expect too much. They come expecting a 5. It's impossible to give a 5. You expected too much. Do patients have unrealistic expectations sometimes we'll never deliver on? Sure they do. So I like to ask the question, and the question you should ask your staff if you work in a hospital or a clinic is, what do we believe are unrealistic patient expectations that we are unlikely to deliver on? Because there should be no surprise to the patient. So if the patient is surprised and we expected it, whose fault is it that they were surprised? Our fault. Well, why didn't you reshape the expectation before they came in on the phone? You know, they called me one day and said, we need you to be here for your colonoscopy at 6:30 in the morning. I'm sorry, 7:30 in the morning. I figured my colonoscopy must be about 8:30 maybe. I arrived at 7:30 in the morning and the lights were off in the waiting room. Little light coming from the hallway, but not enough light to read. I'm sitting there for half an hour. No, it was 6:30. I'm sorry. I'm getting it mixed up. Because now that I know that the person came in at 7 and turned on the lights, and I had been there half an hour in the dark. Turned on the light. My procedure was at 11:30. Now, you made the appointment with me. I didn't walk in here and say, I'd like a colonoscopy. Could you please work me in? You called me. You made an appointment with me. I came when you told me I would be, and it's 11:30. Now, I have pretty realistic expectations in healthcare. I figure I may wait 45 minutes or an hour, but I wouldn't think it would be from 6:30 to 11:30. That's beyond my expectation. So by the time, and I was the last person that they took into the room, by the time I went in there, I was really I was uncomfortable chair to sit in. You have no padding. They give you a little sheet to put around you. You sit there in a gown. When I walked in, there was the doctor, there was the nurse. They smiled, they greeted me. How's everything going, they said. Now, what do you think I said? I don't know why you brought me in here at 6:30. And I said, you think you know what kind of position I will be in a few minutes? Colonoscopy. Do you know what that is? You think I'm going to get these two people all upset by what I say? No, I'm going to say, wonderful, I'm doing great, thank you so much. I'm going to be nice because they're going, they can retaliate. You think you want to make them mad? People don't want to make their caregivers angry when they're in the hospital. That's self-defeating. Why would you do that? You're going to say something about the nurse that takes care of you, and when you ring your bell, you really think she's going to come running next time she heard that you don't like her? We have to think like a patient. But my point is really this. After my procedure, they called me, which I think is a great practice in America that gives us better patient-centered care than most other places, and that is that they called the patient after procedure and said, how did it go? They called me. I said, I don't know why I had to be there at 6:30. They said, oh, well, your particular doctor, has to have all his patients there at 6:30, and he chooses which one he will take after he sees all of you. He says, oh, take that one, then that one. And he does not tell us ahead of time which patient he wants first. Now, what is my point here? If there is something that was no surprise to you, it is your fault it was a surprise to me. Because why? You called me, make the appointment. Why didn't you say, your doctor likes all his patients here? There's going to be 4 of you that morning. We don't know if you'll be first, second, or third, or last. If you're last, it's going to be around 11 or 12 o'clock. Maybe you want to bring something to read just in case you are the last one. Now I could sit there and I would be thinking, well, I wonder why he took that guy first. And what do you think my answer would be? He's worse off than me. Because surely the doctor takes his worst one first. So I am now cheering to be last. And when I'm the last one, I'm thinking, yes, aren't I the lucky one? I'm the healthy one. He's not worried about me, or he would have taken me first. It is your fault that I was upset when you were on the telephone. And it's too late to tell me after I get there. You tell me at 6:30, 7 o'clock, I say, why did that person go before me? I was here first. I got undressed before he did. And you say, well, your doctor likes to take his patients one by one when he chooses. Too late, too late. When it happens is not the time to explain something. If you know something might happen, you have to shape the expectation way up the line at the telephone call time, so I am prepared when I come. That's changing the bottom one, right? Changing the expectation so that I will have the experience that you predicted. But that's not our goal. Shaping people's expectations down is a possibility, but that's not going out of the box. Out of the box is to try to improve this one, wouldn't you agree? Make the patient's story better than they expected. If you're going to make it better than they expected, I can tell you right now, you will have no data. You have only evidence. Evidence is different than measurement. Wouldn't you agree? You can measure my level of satisfaction, but certain things we only know we should do from evidence, not from what we are measuring. So I want to say the first thing is to focus on things that cannot be standardized. All the Six Sigma people in the room, all the PDCA people in the room cannot be standardized. If it can't be standardized, it also cannot be measured. That's the first out-of-the-box thinking we will have to go to. It launches our moonshot. So I will go to the person who you thought said if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Have you heard that one? If you cannot measure it with data, how can you improve it? You have to have a target to improve against, and the target has to be a number, a rating, something. Now, we would expect that thought came from Deming. But I point you to the middle of Deming's great book, Out of the Crisis, which was written for the American factories, he went to Japan and later wrote this book for the United States because the United States was caught in a crisis created by Deming where Japanese product went from lousy to fantastic in 5 years. It shocked American industry. So he said, well, you want out of the crisis? Do what I taught him to do in Japan and stop doing things the way you have been used to doing them in the United States. But in the middle, he says the most important numbers, the most important figures, the most important things one needs for management. I suppose that's almost everybody in this room. So this is for you. Your most important figure is what? Well, he says it's unknowable. It's unknown to you, especially if you have a blind spot created by data. Outside of that blind spot, it will be unknown to you. You won't know what you're missing because you are not measuring it. And then he goes on to give us our topic for my 90 minutes. What is the multiplying effect of a happy customer, we will say of a happy patient and their family, compared to the multiplying effect on your reputation of an unhappy customer and their family? In other words, what is the multiplying effect of patient perceptions? That's Deming. That's your guru for Six Sigma. Even Lean Six Sigma, this is still your guru. Lean Six Sigma is only about cutting out waste. And if you cut out waste, will you end up cutting out the most important thing in creating great perceptions? By calling it waste. Why would you call it waste? It's waste because we can't measure it. It's waste because we cannot operationalize it. It's waste because we cannot manage it. It's waste because we cannot standardize it. See how the moonshot is starting to take effect? If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. That needs to go by the wayside. So, let's go to number 2 in the triple aim. In the triple aim, in the United States version, they use the word patient experience. I know that you're using a slightly variation on that. But here's the key thing. Patient-centered means providing care. This is from the IHI. Providing care that is respectful of and responsive to. Up to that point, we have courtesy. But the minute we go to individual patient preferences, how can you standardize that? I mean, they've gone right away from standardization to customization. Needs and values. So you adopt to the patient, and patients are varying. And that means instead of reducing variation, we are now increasing variation because you are treating this patient in the way they need to be treated, and they may not have the same reaction to the diagnosis as this patient is. So that would be you treat this patient different than that patient. That's what that says. It's not Fred Lee. That's why we're here today. Another thing that's not Fred Lee is this. The triple aim calls something true north. What is true north? All the compasses of the world point to true north. What is true north? Well, level A is patient experience, and you know these levels if you know anything about the AAA, and I don't want to get into those, except to just enlarge on this one. True north is, according to Donald Berwick, talking about the AAA, talking about the chasm in healthcare. True north lies in level A. What is level A? The patient experience. In the experience of patients and their loved ones, and the communities in which there lives, it is the overarching statement of purpose. So in the AAA, the overarching statement of purpose, of course, is the patient experience. And then one more quote that I like. Don Berwick gives 10 rules for redesign of your organization. IHI again. 10 rules for redesign. I'm only showing you the first 3, which are pointing to true north. 1, care is based on continuous healing relationships. Boy, healing is a strange word to use here because healing now includes people's emotions. Healing. You can heal without curing. People can face their illness through your help in such a way that they feel like you had a healing They had a healing experience, but they were not cured. The minute you use the word healing, you are forced to consider a person's emotions, not strictly their physical needs. Healing is different than doing surgery. Doing the surgery and doing it right is one set of metrics. But if you change the word to the whole experience as a healing experience, you have changed the dimension of the surgery. Number 2, care in order to be healing has to be what? This is not Fred Lee again. This is your own language. It has to be customized according to the patient needs and values, to respond to individual patient choices and preferences even. It's not doing it right all the time, which is the definition of quality. It is doing it the way the patient wishes, in the manner they wish, at the time they wish, in the place they wish. That's what we mean by having the patient in control. This is where we have a trouble going. And if we're having trouble going in the United States this way, I believe it's a universal concern in healthcare, how to go there. I think what we're talking about is universal. So here is the paradox. See, if you don't remember anything else, try to just remember this. Here's the paradox of healing. Paradox is between clinical and healing. Number 1, standardize and reduce variation. We have to do that for safety and quality. Safety, courtesy, clinical quality. We follow tight guidelines. We measured for little variation. We want to always make the mark, not have a lot of variation. That's Deming's definition of quality. It's not what is your average, it is what is your variation. That matters more than your average. But we customize and increase variation for the patient experience, especially if you define it as healing. That's a paradox. We have to have measurement and standardization. We also have to have customization and personalization, and we also include the family in the experience, not just the patient. That's the moon, if you can get there. Within the constraints of your budget. You have to ask yourself, can a person be compassionate without wasting time? Or will Six Sigma Lean come along and say, that 5 minutes you took to comfort the woman who was crying, you should have just left. Don't sit down and comfort her. We don't have time for that. So are we going to consider meeting emotional needs waste because it is not doing those things that we can standardize? So we have two kinds of measurement. Outcomes, clinical, financial, we can measure those. Process outcomes, efficiency can be measured. But Deming said, as much as PDCA works over there, it doesn't work over here because you haven't got the same things. And then I want to make a distinction between a patient who is satisfied and a patient who becomes a promoter of your hospital, a fan. They love you. Remember, perceptions go all the way from we hate you to we love you. As long as you're dedicated to patient satisfaction, you'll be happy if they just don't hate you. But the moonshot for us is how can we make them love us? Because it is right for healing, not because we're trying to get something for ourselves. So satisfaction is good. Becoming a promoter is great. Satisfaction means no complaints. A promoter is a fan. They love you. Some fans write you a letter and say, you were wonderful. Let me tell you what some of your nurses did for my mother on her birthday in the hospital. And all of a sudden you think, we have wonderful nurses who will pay attention to the birthday when somebody is 90 years old and they turn 90 in a hospital bed. The nurses said, well, let's do a little something special. Yeah, a fan. It doesn't take everybody doing something special every time to create a fan. It often takes only one person at the perfect moment who did the perfect thing that the patient will never forget. Then we have an experience when that happens. See, can you be perfect in every way and not create a fan? Well, let's take it. This is the story I like to tell. You're kind of a sophisticated audience, so I'll try not to be too dramatic. I'm already quite dramatic, and I get a little more dramatic in my stories. Let's pretend I'm a patient who hates needles and drawing blood. And by the way, wouldn't you say that the most common procedure we do in the hospital that can be called an invasive procedure is drawing blood? I don't think you can get admitted to a hospital if they don't draw your blood first, or at least in the first 10 minutes that you're there. It's the first thing they do. So I want to take a universal procedure that is invasive, that everyone experiences, so I can make a universal point that would cover all procedures that are invasive. If you can do it on the smallest one, then it's true for every. It's true north on the little one is true north for the big ones too. So let's take a look. So I'm in my bed. I've just been admitted from the emergency department. A pleasant person walks in, smiles, and says, "Good morning, Mr. Lee. My name is Sherry. I'm here to draw your blood today. We'll probably be drawing your blood every day to check on your progress." I said, "Oh, they already drew my blood. Could you check with the emergency department?" Well, no, that's to see if you need to be admitted. We will be drawing your blood to see if you should stay. Or can you go home? Oh, dear, so you can't use there? No, afraid we can't. Now, what I want to emphasize here is that this person has done everything you could possibly expect from a person drawing blood. She introduced herself, she smiled, she used the patient's name, she told the patient why she's here and what she's going to do, she made eye contact. As she drew up her chair, she went to her focus on her drawing the blood. But you see, we have silence when that happens, because we can script what you say when you come into the room, but you're on your own after that to get through the procedure. What happens in silence just before an invasive procedure? A little awkward? I gave you only, 7 seconds, and it was starting to get awkward. What if I did that for 5 minutes? You'd say, "Well, I'm gone." You'd leave. Be angry if I stood here, going through my slides for 5 minutes, trying to find it. So silence just before a procedure means the mind will go where? If you don't capture what I'm thinking about, if you don't shape what I'm thinking about, where will my mind go? Especially if I'm afraid of needles. It's going to go to everything that could possibly go wrong, which will make me what? Tense. Now, what could go wrong with a blood draw? I don't know. My mother told me when I was 9 years old, they could put a bubble in your arm, go right to your heart, and kill you. A bubble could kill you. My mother told me that. I have been watching for bubbles since I was 9 years old. Doctor came up to me after I said this, and he said, "You have an irrational fear of bubbles." I said, "Are you sure it's irrational? That would mean it never could happen." He said, "That's right, it's irrational. It could never happen, never has happened that I've ever heard of, never in the literature. It's a stupid thing to be afraid of since it could never happen." I said, "Well, where were you when my mother was learning about blood draw?" And he said, so he started to go away. He said, then he said, "You know what it would take to kill you with a bubble? It would take a needle on the end of a bicycle pump, and they'd have to pump only air as hard as they could, and even then I doubt they could kill you." He started to walk away, and I said, "Well, just a minute. What are the nurses doing when they hold a syringe up in the air and snap it a few times, and then they squirt something out of there? What are they doing?" He didn't say anything. I said, "I think I will stop worrying about bubbles when the nurses do. I mean, if they're doing this, what's the patient going to think? It must have a purpose." What else could go wrong? Did you know they could blow out your vein? Blow out your vein. What does that sound like to you? The next time you have your blood drawn, tell yourself, they could blow out my vein. It means they run the needle clear through to the other side. It bleeds out underneath. You get a big bruise right here. They have, you know what they say when they blow out your vein? I saw it happen to my son. You know what she says? "Oops." Now, how do you think it sounds to the person who is going to get an invasive procedure if just before you do your procedure you say, "Oops"? And then she says to my son, "Give me your other arm." Why would you do that? He looked at me like, "Oh, do I have to give her my other arm?" And I thought, the patient bill of rights, I have every right to say, bring another phlebotomist. If you can't get it on one stick, bring me somebody else. But she's in a lab coat. And you don't argue with people in a lab coat. So I said, "Be brave." To my son. I feel bad about that to this day. I couldn't stand up for him because, white coats, we don't stand up to white coats, especially if they have a stethoscope in there. You would never stand up to a white coat with a stethoscope. What else could go wrong? How many sticks? Ow, 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 ow. How many times is she going to stick me? Because let me tell you, the last thing I want is a determined person trying to draw my blood. I want you to give up quickly, please. Call somebody else who knows what they're doing. Yeah. If I'm having these kind of thoughts in the silent period just before I get the needle, what is happening to my heart rate? What is happening to my blood pressure? What is happening to my pain threshold? Means everything hurts more because I'm tense, because I'm nervous, because you've got me in at least a small state of anxiety. So when you put that tourniquet around my arm and it pinches some skin, ow, everything hurts more than it should. I look down there and I think, if you can't see the skin in the knot, how will you ever find my vein? And the patient perception is, "Oh dear, I have a blind phlebotomist today." Phlebotomist is what we call people who draw blood in the States. "I have a blind phlebotomist today." And then when she's feeling for a vein, I watch her face carefully and it has a frown on it. What does a frown tell you when you are looking for something? Well, it means you can't find it. And so I want to say, hold it. You don't have a vein. Let me help you out. If I could could you give me something to squeeze maybe? There, quick. Of course, I wouldn't do any of these things because it's not manly. This doesn't look very manly, you know. If I was really, really nervous, the manly thing to do, of course, is give him your arm and brace yourself and basically say, do anything you want to, I will not flinch. Hit me with a couple of bubbles. I heard they don't kill me. Stick me all you want to, you'll see a brave man here. Yeah, you can trust me with state secrets. Torture me, go ahead. Okay, so that's the manly pose. I can't look because I'm too... She hits me with a needle. Ow! How big was that? I look, oh, she got it. First stick. Well, she thinks... I hope the patient noticed I got it on the first stick. And of course, I didn't notice she got it on the first stick. So she's thinking, he must think I'm really good. And I'm thinking, how lucky was that? Why am I thinking it's pure luck? Because all the little cues that I pick up on, that go through my mind, that you never see and never hear, are if you couldn't see my skin in the knot, and you had a frown on your face when you were doing this, I have already decided that if you get my vein, it will be pure luck. I've already made up my mind. So when you got it, you confirmed. You didn't confirm you're good. You just confirmed that you were lucky. That's the difference between patient perceptions and the things we can measure. They are impressions that come into the brain that influence their thinking. And you can't measure them. Of course, I'm glad. She pulls out, puts a Band-Aid on. Said, now then, Mr. Lee, before I leave, is there anything else I can do for you? And I say, no, you did plenty. Thank you. She leaves. Let's pretend that somebody's doing some patient research, just happened to see the phlebotomist leave my room. Oh, I think I'll go in and ask the patient, how did we do? So here comes the clipboard. Good morning, Mr. Lee. Yes, do you mind if I ask a few questions about our care? No, go ahead. Was the phlebotomist just here? Did she draw your blood? Yes, she did draw my blood, in fact. Do you mind if I ask a few questions? No, go ahead. Okay, first of all, when she came in, did she smile? Yes. Did she introduce herself? Yes. Did she tell you why she's here and what she's planning to do? Yes. Did she tell you how long it will take? Yes. Did she answer any of your questions? Yes. And when it came to drawing your blood, did she get the blood on the first stick, which would be our clinical quality measurement? And I say, yes, she did. Great, Mr. Lee. Now, can you think of any way she could have been better? No, of course I can't. I have no idea. She was perfect. How can she be better? There is no way. So would you say that was a 5 on a 5-point scale? Yes, of course, give her a 5. 10-point scale, 10. But see, our question is, I was a satisfied patient and cannot tell you how to improve because I had no complaint. But am I a fan? We don't know. There's only one test for a fan. If I do not care who comes back tomorrow to draw my blood, then I was not a fan of Sherry. She's just another person who does a good job. Send anybody you want to up here. If they're all as good as her, I'm happy. I know that my nervousness and tension has nothing to do with her. It's all in my own mind. I don't blame her because I'm tense. She did everything she could to help me not be tense. Or did she? Good morning, Mr. Lee. My name is Sherry. I'm here to draw your blood today. We're here to draw your blood. Didn't they already draw my blood in emergency? Well, yeah, that was just to see if you needed admitting, but we're going to see when you can go home, and we have to check every day. I said, oh, I hate needles. She sits down, and she says something else. Instead of creating silence, it is in the moments before a procedure that we have the golden opportunity to reduce anxiety. So what if she said, you know, Mr. Lee, I've been doing this for a lot of years, And in those years, you get good at what you do. Beginners can be a little rough, but I have learned to be very gentle. In fact, they call me Gentle Sherry here. And as they call you Gentle Sherry, and as she's feeling for a vein, she says, yes, and not only that, you have a really good vein here. I should have no trouble with this one. And I say, are you sure? I don't see a vein there. She said, well, yes, we don't look for veins. We feel for them. I can feel it right there. There, you want to feel it? No, I don't want you to lose it. And then I can watch, because this is Gentle Sherry, and she's found the vein. She puts a tourniquet around my arm, but before she does that, she says, oh, do you live around here? Yes, I raised 2 kids near here. My son is a Macintosh technician for Mac. She's a Mac tech, works at CompUSA, a store that carries a lot of Mac computers. My daughter, who went through college on a mathematics, science scholarship in pre-med, graduated at the top of her class, and today she's a very fine artist. Okay, so she paints for a living, pre-med, science, mathematics. Did you get that? Yeah, okay. So I'm talking to her, but she's gotten to be a very fine artist. Tom Hanks bought one of her paintings. And just when I'm talking about Tom Hanks, she puts a tourniquet around, she pinches a little skin. But do you see what has happened? I am thinking about my daughter selling a painting to Tom Hanks. I'm hoping you heard that. And this little pain doesn't notice this, because my mind is trying to convey some thought from here to you. But now when she feels for a vein, I get focused quickly. And when she puts, I can watch, because she's told me she's Gentle Sherry. She puts the needle in, it didn't hurt a bit. After she's done, I said, man, God, you're fantastic. She said, well, I told you. I said, I didn't even feel it. She said, well, I didn't know you could be so gentle that I couldn't feel it. Well, that's the way it is, Mr. Lee, when you've been doing it a long time. And as she stands up and says, is there anything else I can do for you, what will I say? Nothing now, but if I have to have my blood drawn tomorrow, will you please be the one to draw my blood? Don't send, rough Rudy up here. I want Gentle Sherry again. Do you see the subtle difference? See, and it isn't that hard to talk to your staff. You say, well, if you can't measure it, I don't know how to talk about it. No, all you have to say to anybody is, are you able to treat a patient as a guest in your house that you hope will come back to visit you again? Bring that personality to our patients and we will be just fine. If every time you do something for a patient, you are thinking, I want this patient to want me back tomorrow. That's all we're doing. Now, of course, you can't measure it, you can't script it, you can't standardize it. It becomes highly individualistic. An extrovert like me will be different with a patient, but I will still figure out what it takes to engage that patient so that they are less nervous, less anxious than an introvert who is not like me at all, but you have your way too. We all know how to treat a person so that they will like us and want to come back, and we know how to treat a guest in our homes, and the way you treat a guest in your home is no different than how they treat a guest in their home in Afghanistan. There's no cultural differences in how we treat our guests. There's only cultural differences in how we treat strangers. It's the only difference. People like to say, oh, that's too Disney for us. Too American for us. We're a little more reserved than that. I'm not talking about that. Treat them like a guest who got sick in your home. That's it. And you want them to remember you as a very caring person. It's just that if we can't measure it, we think we can't focus on it. Now, we can learn from people with a complaint, and we can learn from people who are fans. We cannot learn from a satisfied person. Why? Satisfied person can make no recommendations and they have no complaints. Complainers, we should hear every one of them. I wish we could get every single complaint and take it seriously. We shouldn't teach our staff to repress people from complaining. They need to welcome anything that helps us do something for a patient that they were disappointed in. But now we can also learn from fans what made them a fan. So I went to my wife when she was the chief nursing officer, director of nurses, 400-bed hospital. And I said, "You get a lot of fan mail?" "Yeah, we get a lot of fan mail." And you know, statistics show that for every fan letter you get, 25 others wanted to write but never did. So don't assume that fan mails is the only people who are fans. Multiply by 25. And I said, "Can you bring your fan mail home? I want to see what makes a fan." So she Xeroxed, copied all the fan mail, crossed out the names, privacy, brought them home to me. I circled the adjectives and adverbs. I counted them up, how many times they're used. The ones used most I put at the top of my list. The ones used least at the bottom of the list. So everything with no plus on it was used only one time. Once. Notice where courteous is. Courtesy, in all this fan mail, courtesy was mentioned only once. Why? How come we're not getting fans for courtesy? Why would I write you a fan mail when all you did is what I expect them to do at McDonald's? I expect them to be courteous too. I expect courtesy everywhere in all industries. There's no such thing as anyone who says, I'm kind of hoping for rude people when I go in there. It doesn't make you special because you're courteous. It only meets expectations, which means we're in our box of patient satisfaction. This gets us out of the box. What word used more than any other word in English by American patients? My wife's hospital. 32 times plus 3 more that are mentioned there. 35 times what word? Caring. Somebody cared. Somebody seemed to care. Somebody was very caring. 35 times. How many of you have heard of the Pareto principle? Pareto. Anybody know Pareto? Thank you. We got some quality people there. It is also known as the 80-20 rule. How many have heard of the 80-20 rule? See, more of you have heard it called that. And the 80-20 rule has been further distilled into saying what are the vital few things that have the greatest impact. I am doing the Pareto principle here. This is the 80-20 rule. What are the vital few things? If we do that, we are the most likely to create a fan. There's all these things that are important, but which are the ones that are likely to finally put us over the board from satisfaction out of that box to a fan? Caring cares. Their perception. I would also say that kind in kindness is the same thing. In statistics, if you do a survey, you never put 2 different variables in the same question. It's too confusing. We wouldn't say, for instance, were we quick and nice? See, you could be nice and not quick and not nice, both, neither. Too many answers. But if I put those 2 questions in a question, were we kind and caring, you would not see those as 2 different things. It's the same variable with a different synonym. And if I said, were we kind, caring, and compassionate, the next one, you still would not be confused, because for all practical purposes, it's one more synonym for the same thing. And if you go down to help and helpfulness, I think that goes with my perception that you were kind. And I know you had compassion because you comforted me. So that's like compassion. So I would say that until we get to friendly, we have one variable only with several synonyms. You can be friendly without being helpful. That's 2 different variables. You can be friendly and not compassionate. You can be friendly but not caring, as at least seeming to care very much, like my first phlebotomist, who was very friendly, but when it came to drawing my blood, she was all business. Which is okay. I'm never going to complain about that because she got it on the first stick. You can be professional, and I hate to say this, but I know a lot of people in healthcare who are highly professional, but neither friendly nor compassionate, nor caring. But they're still professional. See the difference that we're talking about? Then you start going through this list. So what would be my next thing to observe? If that was my observation, I would say the next thing is, none of those words will ever be on a patient satisfaction survey because they exceed satisfaction and they're highly subjective. Therefore, you cannot measure it. And that is why the very thing that matters most to the patient in creating a fan will never be measured. You cannot measure greatness. But there is evidence for it because the evidence is in your fan mail. So can you act on evidence without metrics? Deming says you have to. The evidence is more important in this case than any metrics we can measure under the banner of patient satisfaction. I don't know what kind of patient satisfaction survey you have, but I almost can guarantee you that none of those words are in the survey, and if they are, they're incidental. And everything that is in your center means that even if they gave you top box score on every question, top box only meets expectations, it does not exceed it. You know what I mean by top box, right? Here's a typical one in America. When they brought you your medication, did they tell you about the potential side effects? Always, sometimes, never. So top box is always. What is my expectation? I expect that you will always tell me about the side effects. There is no such thing as sometimes as my average expectation. So all of our questions in America on our surveys, especially the HCAP surveys, those surveys are all top box is only meets expectations. There is no such thing as a top box that exceeds it. Except maybe in the overall question that says on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend our hospital? Now we can get some likely, not very likely at the very top. We might be able to do a net promoter scale on that question, but not on the individual ones because the individual ones are our must-do things. We are asking the patient to check off for us. Did they always do this? Yes, they did. Did they always do this? Yes, they did. Yes would be 5 on a 5-point scale, except our problem is we have a 4-point scale, which makes it even easier to get a top box on because 4 points, you give it 2 points, top box is really easy. 3 points is a little bit harder. 4 points, the higher the scale, the harder it is to get a lot of top box. So we in America went from a 5-point scale now to a 4-point scale. The opposite of greatness. Cannot measure greatness on a 4-point scale, but you can make a checklist for the patient to see did we always do the things we're supposed to be doing. We really have to make a distinction here between satisfaction and greatness. Judy, I have time for that story? Yes, I know my 90 minutes is up at 1:30 because I looked at my watch and I knew it's 90 minutes. Then we'll have 10 minutes for questions. I wanted to talk about Judy. Judy had a radical mastectomy for breast cancer, advanced breast cancer. They took lymph nodes, muscle tissue. The doctor said she had a life expectancy now of only 3 years. She told me that all she could think about is how she will not live long enough for her granddaughter to know her, to remember her. She had a new granddaughter. And she thought, what good is it to live if I'm never going to be part of my granddaughter's life? All the pain and suffering that goes with chemotherapy and radiation, she heard about that. She thought, do I really want that if my life expectancy is only 3 years and you can't promise me 4 or 5? The life expectancy doesn't change much whether you get chemotherapy and radiation or not. So she said that in the hospital, she was so discouraged. All she wanted to do is cry, but she didn't cry because her husband was sitting by her, and she felt like for his sake, she should be brave. And so instead of crying, she kept saying, you need to go home, honey, and get your sleep because I can't sleep if you sit here, because I will be too worried about you sitting up in an uncomfortable chair all night. You must go home so I can sleep. What she meant was so I can cry. So he went home, turned off the light, gave her a kiss. As soon as he left, she dissolved into tears, and she was sobbing quietly in her bed when a nurse came in. The nurse had a little tray in her hand, and when she came over to Judy's bedside, turned on the light, looked down and saw that Judy was crying. She turned the light off. She put her little tray down on the table, took the chair Judy's husband had been sitting in, pulled it up to the side of Judy's bed, sat down, reached out and touched Judy's arm. Judy said, I was just trying to pull myself together for the nurse, but when she did that, it was like somebody finally said, go ahead and cry. Who would blame you? You don't have to be brave for me. I'm your nurse. I take these things in stride. But I'm here for you because I care. She said nothing, but that's what Judy felt. Remember, we're talking patient perceptions, not scripts. She said she cried so hard, she never cried that hard in her life before or since. Pretty soon she even started thinking of other patients, and she thought, I need to stop. Maybe she won't stop holding my hand if I don't stop crying. So she stopped, pulled herself together, looked up to the nurse and said, you're an angel. I needed that cry so bad I'll never be able to explain to anybody how discouraged I am, but you have made me feel I got that out. Thank you, thank you. I will never forget you as long as I live. Now, this Judy was giving me her fan mail. I mean, she was right. She was giving me like a letter about what made somebody wonderful in the hospital. And then the nurse stood up and said what she planned to say when she came into the room. She picked up her tray and said, Judy, I've brought you something to help you sleep. And then Judy said to me, you know, Fred, you'll sleep better at night if you believe your nurse really, really cares about you. Because when somebody holds your hand while you are crying, you immediately believe they really care about you. And if they really care about you, you can go to sleep and not worry, because they'll never be able to go past the door of your room without checking on you. You don't have to watch your own drip to make sure when it runs out you push the call button. The nurse will never let that go out. In other words, trust. We love the word trust for patients. Doctors want to be trusted. Our surveys say, how well did you trust your medical team? Trust, trust, trust. Do you think you build trust just because of your expertise? Or did you build the trust through some form of relationship that made the patient feel like you cared? We link trust to caring, because if you don't really care about me, even if you're a highly skilled person, it doesn't mean that you'll care enough to check on me. So I don't know how you can separate trust from empathy. I would say, in fact, it's impossible. The sense of caring. I said, wow, Judy, that's a wonderful story. And she said, well, if you tell my story, you have to tell your audience, if there's nurses in there, I have a special message for them. I said, yes, I know. It's a message about how compassionate the nurse was. She said, no, not exactly. I said, okay, what do you want me to add to that? She says, if you ever speak to nurses and use my story, I want you to tell them that they can sometimes be of more comfort to a complete stranger than that person's family can be. She says, I think most nurses think that when it comes to comforting the patient, the family is in the best position to do that. She says, that nurse would have done the wrong thing if she had run down the hall and brought my husband back. She said, until this happened to me, I would have always thought my husband would be the most comforting presence in the room for me if I was ever suffering. But when I'm trying to protect him from how deeply discouraged I am, that's not the most comforting presence. You want a clinical person to understand you and care about you. Wow. I said, okay, Judy, I would never have made that point. I'm glad you told me to make it. So I went home to my wife, and I said to my wife, told her Judy's story, Judy's point. She said, well, Fred, if you're going to make Judy's point, I have another point you should make for the nurses also. She has her master's degree, I think I already mentioned, in public health. Public health is about preventing serious diseases, not curing them. It's about prevention. A big part of her class was getting acquainted with the work and, of course, the subsequent science that goes with psychoneuroimmunology. She said that what she likes to tell her nurses is that compassion can often be something more powerful than any drug we have in our arsenal if it reduces a patient's anxiety to where they can cope emotionally. As long as Judy cannot cope with this devastating surgery and this devastating diagnosis, she will be damaging her immune system. She will not get the killer T cells and the right things out to fight the cancer. So the very thing she needs tonight is to change from being unable to cope with her overwhelming emotions to changing that so that she can finally sleep and wake up in the morning and begin to cope. There is no drug you can order that can do that for a patient. So when my nurses practice compassion, I thank them every day. And if I saw that nurse coming out of Judy's room and I'm the director of nurses, I would have put my arm around her and said, bless you. You have a healing influence on patients that we cannot bottle. Thank you. Wow. I said, okay, I'll make that point too. It is now 25 years since Judy told me her story, and she's still alive. And my wife would have said it could have happened that night when she was turned around from poor coping to being able to handle and deal with this in a way that wasn't so devastating. And if she's trying to shield from her family her true feelings, and everybody who waits on her does not give her permission to share her true feelings because they're in a hurry and it's obvious, then she could stay in that emotional state for months. Maybe within 24 hours of surgery, that was the best drug we could give that night. One whose results cannot be measured. And yet we can do scientific clinical studies that can measure the results on empathy in a controlled trial where we have people who have the same problem as these people, and the only difference is these people got more empathy than these people. Then we have a clinical trial, but now we're talking about evidence. We're not talking about any metrics we can measure. We have to trust evidence more. We like to talk about evidence-based medicine. What about the evidence of the power of empathy to help a person cope with a horrible diagnosis that I doubt anybody in this room understands until it happens to them? I had a wife who died at 28 years old in the ICU from a terminal bite from a mosquito, encephalitis, in Singapore. And ever since then, I only remember two kinds of people. Those people who treated her as if they loved her even though they didn't know her, and those people who treated her like she was just another clinical case. And we felt no emotional connection whatsoever. I remember those two extremes. The only people I cannot remember are the people who did their job well every day. We had no complaints. They were perfect, but not memorable. We just remember those two extremes as a family. So yes, I have been there. I'm talking about grief and pain that I've suffered very close to home. She's the mother of my two children. They were 5 and 2 when she died. So Hans Selye says, stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline cause shrunken immune tissue, growth of tumors, weakening of the body's ability to heal itself. This is a person who wrote 1,700 scientific papers, 15 monographs and 7 books on psychoneuroimmunology, who was a physician scientist in Canada. Came from Austria, by the way. I saw a study done that asked this question: by reducing stress measured by daily cortisol, actually twice a day, morning and evening, levels, women with advanced breast cancer who have abnormal daytime levels of cortisol, a hormone release in response to stress, are significantly more likely to die sooner. Actually, almost doubled, went from 3 years to 5.9 than those with normal. So in other words, we have bad coping, which increases distress, decreases natural killer T-cell activity, increases the spread and severity, decreases the disease-free time of survival. I showed this study to a group of oncologists here in the Netherlands, and I said, if you have any problem at all with what I am saying, I want to be corrected. Because I don't want to say something that your scientific community of physicians who deal with cancer every day would say that's a little hokey. And nobody contradicted it. In fact, at least 10 or 15 of them came up afterwards to reassure me that people need to hear this. This chart is exactly what we see. There are people who cope better than others, and the results are different. Adapting coping, just the opposite of all those things. Now, if Judy is left without any kind of comfort, she goes, the usual normal 3 years, she'll end up in an oncology unit for chemotherapy and radiation so severe that she nearly dies there. Then we have her keeping her out of pain, and then of course maybe 3 or 4 days before we think she's going to die, we bring hospice in or we take her to a hospice. And all of these places are noted for their compassion. How come compassion is so big here? But when it happens, just another patient. Oh, too bad. Judy, I brought you something to help you sleep. Oh, I see that you're not really disposed right now. Is there anything I could do for you, Judy? No. When you're feeling better, call me and I'll give you your sleeping pill. Okay. Yeah, there's your perfectly right, correct way to do it. But it doesn't help do that. Because what my wife's point is simply this: why can't we have an intervention on the night of surgery that moves the patient from that emotional state to this emotional state? And why wouldn't we consider that best clinical practice, not superficial courtesy? Here's just a few studies on stress and research and immune system. Clinical studies show strong relationship between clinician empathy and better outcomes, better compliance, reduced length of stay. Cost effectiveness. Those of you who think this is about cost, what if this moment of Judy's life helped her get out of the hospital sooner because she wasn't so depressed that people felt like she had to stay in here longer? So length of stay, better outcomes, and these are research I found on the internet, pain management, cancer progression, all in medical journals, none of them in popular journals. This is all medical journals. Pain management, cancer progression, diabetes control using A1C as the measure. By the way, why might people suggest Judy, when she goes from the hospital, get into a support group? They have found that people in a support group tend to also live longer than people who are not in a support group. What is the point of a support group? What is Judy going to get in a support group she will probably not even get at home? Compassion. We're all in this together. Commiseration. Empathy. So I guess it is an important part of healing for Judy to be in a support group. Why can't this support come from the clinical staff on night 1? It's a clinical thing. Stop talking about it as if it was a courtesy thing. Difference between these two patients is astronomical. This is service over here. She wants to be there. She's having a great day. She looks her best. She gets to say no. She gets to say, if you talk to me that way, I just won't buy here anymore. She can walk out. She can refuse care. She can refuse. She's the boss. But as soon as you're in a hospital bed, that all changes. You can't walk out because somebody said something a little rude to you. You can't say, I'm never doing business here again. You can't even have a fit because you don't want to get people angry who are the very key people who have to take care of you. So I like to say that we are not in the service business if that is what service is. That is too simplistic for what we do. Would you agree with that? Way too simple. However, do we need to treat people with courtesy? Of course. It just doesn't go far enough to mean anything. The ways we are different. Over here, if you have to go to the restroom, go to the toilet, they just point down the hall. Over here, think about it. If you have to go to the restroom, somebody helps you go. Insert a catheter. Think of how embarrassing that is. The difference in intimacy is astronomical. The difference in privacy is astronomical. The difference in how I feel and sense of control is astronomical. Why would we go to Marriott to learn how to treat our patients better? Anyway, let's take a look quickly at this grid. On the left side, I have emotional distress, 1 to 10. Obviously, Judy was a 10, and Sherry drawing my blood was probably a 2. Emotional distress, 10 and 2. Wouldn't we agree that both need a little, one needs more of a calming reassurance, the 2 needs to be calm a little bit, reassured a little bit, but when it comes clear up to a 10, it may need somebody pulling up a chair and holding the hand of somebody who's crying, and you can't ask them, what could I do for you? Nobody's going to say, if you want to do something for me, please pull up a chair and hold my hand. See what I mean? It has to come from the heart. So our empathetic response is scaled naturally. We don't have to decide what it is. It's something we all know, how big a scale the person's emotions are. Here's service. Here's healing. We're closer to here with my blood draw, but Judy isn't anywhere like this in our 2 stories. Courteous behaviors, compassionate behaviors. Courtesy is hardwired, scripted. By hardwired, it means you have to do it if you want to work here. Hardwired means you're fired if you're not courteous. It means it is required. And it's often scripted. Say hello, tell them why you're here, what you're going to do. When you leave, say, is there anything else I can do for you? Up here, I can't use that word. Up here, we have the variation now because it has to be customized, personalized. Don Berwick said so. So if you get up here, it's more heart-wired, if there's such a word, which means it has to come from the heart. Judy's nurse can't be thinking about scores somewhere. She can only think about Judy tonight and customize her approach to Judy. And of course, then we have cues that people pick up in the process. I'm going to end on this slide and then let you ask questions. Here's a program at Harvard University Medical Center called Program in Placebo Studies and the Therapeutic Encounter. What is the mission of this? Here's their mission. By the way, it's only organized recently, 2011. That means that what I am talking about has gained so much momentum that they're now having an entire branch of Harvard Medical School to study this and coordinate all the studies in the world that have anything to do with this. And here's the point. Its purpose is to bring together researchers who are examining the placebo response and the impact of medical ritual. Medical ritual is a shot, a pill, anything you do, physical examination by the doctor listening to your heart, feeling you around, that's medical ritual, because they're finding out that patients who have the same problem. One gets medical ritual, and the other one has somebody who simply looks at their chart and says, at their x-rays. You can learn anything you can learn this way, you can learn from an MRI. So instead of touching the patient, they just talk from an MRI, and they found that there was a placebo effect in just touching the patient in what they perceive medical ritual. Patient-physician relationship, the power of imagination. I see Judy's nurses sitting down by Judy because she imagined what it must feel like to be told you have 3 years to live. The power of that imagination to enter into a patient's suffering. Imagination, hope. Judy needed more hope. She was totally desolate. Trust, hope and trust, and these things go together. Persuasion. And then these are words that I picked up. I like this. Compassion and empathic. In other words, back to this slide here. Compassion and empathic response in the healing process. And that ends my 90 minutes. I told you there would be some slides left over for you to purview. And you wanted some question and answer, so let's take some time for some questions. I don't know if I'll have the answer, but I can certainly hear your question.
Can we train our staff to be compassionate?
Can you train people to be compassionate? Well, since compassion comes from the heart, the word we need to stop using is training and say, can we inspire it? I believe every single human being possesses it. There's no such thing as a person with zero compassion who is working in your hospital, because they would be a psychopath. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are some psychopaths that can make it into the medical profession. But that is a psychopathic definition. It's also a definition of extreme autism on the autism scale is no empathy. No empathy. So let's start with the fact everyone, certainly anyone choosing nursing and clinical things, already has the capacity. We don't have to teach them to it. What I think has to be done is we have to inspire it, which means you would need a manager who puts her arm around you when you gave compassion to a patient and said, bless you, you have a wonderful healing experience. Influence on patients. If you have a nurse manager who does that to you, that is a lot different than how long were you sitting down. And if the first thing the nurse hears when she comes out of the room is, you must have been in there for 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, it was all about how long she sat there, and it wasn't about what she did. If it isn't valued, it will not be done. So the first is not only to inspire her. I guess it starts with, do we value what I said? If you value it, then the real question is, how do we persuade others to value it, including the physicians? Because I'd like to believe that when Judy told her physician what the nurse did, that oncologist or surgeon went out of that room and said to the director of nurses, you have a really good nurse. Find out who the nurse was for Judy last night and pass on my compliments. You create a culture by what you value, and what you value is signified by what you talk about most. If you talk about money more than anything else, efficiency more than anything else, then your staff will understand that trumps anything else, including compassion. If you want something to trump efficiency, you really have to talk about it a lot, value it, inspire it, and thank people who do it. And again, it is not everybody doing it every time I turn around. It is at the perfect moment when Judy is weeping her heart out. Wouldn't you like a caregiver to be the perfect person for Judy at that moment? I don't have to have the people down in the lab be this person. I don't have to. Judy's trust in the hospital was created by one person in 10 minutes by her bedside. We're not talking about everybody takes 10 minutes. Every nurse, every patient, everybody. No, we're not. We're talking about a triage mentality. Judy needs this the most right now. None of my patients are as discouraged as she is. I will triage my time, so I will give her extra tonight and take a little time from that person who has family there taking care of her, watching over her, telling us every time she needs an ice cube and everything, So we're trusting people with judgment when we're a room full of people who like to dismiss judgment and create rules. When you create rules and checklists, you're telling a person you don't trust their judgment. But you'll never create all the rules and checklists that go with compassion, which means you're going to have to hire people you can trust to be compassionate when needed. Not every minute of every patient's time at the bedside. So I don't think it's about training. In fact, I would say training is really good for what you can hardwire, which is, did you smile? Did you say, yes, they need training for that. They need training in courtesy. And then you can hardwire that. But in that training, you do need to talk about how we are, because of pain and suffering, we have to trust you to go beyond that when necessary, to customize your attention to what the need is of the patient. That is what Berwick is saying here. It'll have to be customized, and you cannot have a checklist or a training for what is customized. That has to come here from the heart. Okay, I don't know if I did a good enough job explaining that, but the better word to say is how can we inspire it, and we won't inspire it if we don't value it. So a higher level question is, if you value it, how can you get the other key people in your organization to value it as much as you? Because it starts with the top valuing it, not with the top being able to do it. I can have a coach, you can have a coach in a soccer team, they'll never be able to show the guys how to make those fabulous kicks, but he sure does know what he wants to value in the team. So I believe, it's like the coach, the senior leadership are like coaches. They share what is valued most, but other people probably have to show it even better than they can show it themselves. But when they show it, you want a leader who values it and says, thank you. That's just the kind of person I was hoping we would have managing our oncology unit or whatever unit. Anything else? Anybody?
Just got two interesting tweets.
Oh, that helps you hide behind a tweet. I kind of like it when you have to raise your hand and show yourself. I mean, I don't get to tweet back. It's off? I'll tell you one that gets asked once in a while. Can you have too much compassion? And number two, will people burn out if they have too much compassion? Those are two common questions. So if you didn't ask it, I'll ask it. Can you have too much compassion? And I would say that's not our problem. Are we more likely to have a problem with too little compassion or too much compassion in our hospital? Do you know a hospital where there's just way too much compassion? They really need to tone it down.
These are the tweets.
Oh, here we go.
And the first one. It's in Dutch. I tried to translate it. You were talking about the director of in a healthcare institution as a coach, but in Holland we see the trend to have the patient as a partner and the physician as a coach.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Perfect. I think that's the whole direction of where I'm going. I made this nurse a partner. Judy's nurse was a partner in her pain, not just a partner in her. When you leave the hospital, you need to do this every day and eat this diet every day and take these pills every day. No. That type of partnership is what too many people think it is. It is a partnership that is so personal that you know how to respond. You know this, but it builds a relation. The best partnership is built on a relationship. So I think the question should be much more, how can we create relationships with our patients so that we really know what they're going through instead of just guessing? It's a better question.
Thank you.
Another one. What's another one?
How do you combine scripts and individual patient needs?
Your scripts are based on every time this happens, what is the best answer? Or every time you have a new patient, what is the best way to introduce yourself. You can write scripts for many, many things. Depends on where you're working. So the only universal script I would have is use the patient's name, so that you say Mr. Lee or Mrs. And if you're not sure what to call them, ask them. Because maybe Robert is not what I like. Maybe you saw on my chart it said Frederick, but I go by Fred. So you come in and say, well, how are you doing today, Frederick? And I think, oh, wait a minute, you know. In fact, for some people, I like Mr. Lee better than Fred because, you know, I'm an older person. I used to be a school teacher, and I felt it was a sign of respect from the very young. You know, my mother said to me one time when I said to her, how did they treat you last night in the hospital? She said, well, pretty good, but one guy came in here, he couldn't be more than 25 years old, and said, how's my girl? She says, I'm 92 years old. What makes him think I'm his girl? So I need this guy to have a script and not just wing it, not just say, how's my girl to anybody older than him. Some people would be offended. So scripts are important. Never go away saying that I dismiss scripts. They are in the box. We have to do what's in the box before we can get outside the box. So I only put scripts in the box, and I'm talking now about customization when the patient has extreme, especially extreme emotional needs. Okay, another one. Oh, is that it? We still got? No, it's just about over.
The last question. Anyone the last question?
Who wants to be last?
Perhaps the one about the healthcare insurance companies and so on. Yes. Do you think?
Is that outpatient? What does that OT mean?
Of the.
Oh, of the patient. Okay.
Is the role of the patient or
customer
reduced by the healthcare insurance companies? Because in the Netherlands they are very mighty.
Yes. They are in America, more mighty than you. I don't think anybody has more mighty insurance. That's why we have, Obamacare has been such a fight. The insurance companies don't want the government to have one say if you're under 65. But I don't see health insurance people at telling you how to provide bedside care. At least they don't here. They simply reimburse per procedure instead of outcome. And I think that that's bad, because then that means the more procedures you do, the more you can be financially successful. So, for instance, my personal doctor, if I need to see a specialist, I have to go to my personal, I guess you do, you have to go to my personal doctor first. I can't call her up and say, I'm having a problem with my prostate. I know she's going to send me to a urologist. I can't call her up and say, I don't even need her okay. In my insurance plan, I can go to anybody I want to. I never need her recommendation. But she still wants me to come in, and then she'll tell me, you need to see an oncologist, and then leave so she can bill my insurance company for one visit. Otherwise, she makes no money if she can do this. If you stop on the phone, well, we have to change that total paradigm. That's our big problem in America, is it's all fee for a specific service or a specific amount of time. And it is true, they won't say 10 minutes for empathy and pay you for it. But the more we get to better and better outcomes, I think we have less about fee for service. The more empathy will become important to everybody. I don't see a big problem between the insurance company. Now, you know your insurance company. If I didn't answer that question very well, explain what I'm missing.
Well, they are very like they are buying care for their patients.
Yes.
And they are steering on efficiency.
Yes. Well, don't they pay you a certain amount for? Do they just give you a big amount of money you live within, or do they in America they pay by the diagnosis? If the diagnosis is this, then you're only going to get this much. If you go over, you eat it. If you can go under, then all the better for you. But we give you one pay. So that's kind of how it is. And so what we're really saying is, insurance industries have a different business plan than we do. An insurance company is a business where money comes in, and money is a measure of greatness. Insurance companies do not measure greatness by how many patients they helped. They measure greatness by how much money they made for their stockholders. So it is money as an input, and greatness is measured by money too. I don't see how we can do that. Money is an input for us, yes, because it's a constraint. This is all the money we get to do what we have to do with, but money is not an outcome for us. That's an outcome for a business, but not in the health services. What is the outcome for us is great patient care. They don't pay for great patient care. They only pay as little as they possibly can to maximize shareholder value. So they and us really don't have the same ultimate goal. And consequently, of course, there's a big argument in America whether the government shouldn't be more involved, especially for those people that insurance companies don't want them. You know, chronic cases, they just charge so much that if you have chronic problems, then you're okay if you have the money for it, but the average person doesn't have the money for it. The only saving thing about the American health system is nobody is denied hospital care because of money or because they don't have insurance. If you show up in an emergency room, everyone will be treated. They will ask you if you have insurance and try to get as much as they can. They will even bill you later, $30,000, and you can say, I don't have that kind of money, and never pay them. They don't arrest you. So it's a strange system. We have a broken system financially. I don't think we have such a broken system if you have the income and you're being taken care of by insurance and all of that. I know that the insurance does affect how we do things in order to make it efficient. One of the things, though, that this seems to presuppose that when Judy's nurse took the extra time with Judy, that somehow cost the hospital something in efficiency. And I would submit to you that if the whole team values what Judy did, the other members of the team will cover with her other patients a little bit if they ring the call button, because they know what you are doing with Judy is really valuable. And you might even be better than me. I am glad to cover the easy patient while you take the difficult one. So I don't see any problem here with efficiency in terms of the phlebotomist who says, I'll be as gentle as I can, was doing something that they can show experimentally that if you reduce a person's anxiety, they're going to feel less pain and tension. I don't see that took more time to do it that way. I don't tell any stories except Judy's is the only one where you could say that took some more time by that nurse at that moment, but then I can make a case for clinical outcomes, for length of stay, for a whole lot of other things to balance that. And again, we're back to people wanting to measure something financially, a return on investment, and I don't know how you will ever measure your return on investment when you invested compassion in a patient who went away loving you. I don't know how you will ever turn that into a return on investment. But our goal is not return on investment. Our goal is great patient outcomes.
These are perfect last words.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. What?
Thank you.
Flowers for me?
For you.
But
for inspiring us, for your wife, then.
All right, that's good. This will look very nice in our hotel room. Beautiful. Thank you.
And some Dutch goodies.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.